Hello, and welcome to my Pekakucha style presentation about invasive species, focusing especially on lionfish. This is for AP Environmental Science, Unit 9, Global Change. Alright, let's move right on in. So first we're going to give some background on what an invasive species is. So just a broad definition. So it's an organism that doesn't belong and overpopulates. So by doesn't belong, it means an organism that has been moved from one habitat, from its original habitat to a new one, and is disrupting the new habitat. And then it can be either a plant or animal, so it's not specific to one type of organism. It is almost always because of humans, like the transportation or the movement of invasive species is almost always because of humans. And these new invasive species can be beneficial or damaging to the new environment that they move to, but they're almost always damaging. How does it happen? So humans often do not realize it's happening. Like humans do not realize that they are responsible for bringing invasive species to new places. They can spread through human transportation unintentionally. So lots of times they crawl onto boats or get caught in boats, blast stream and stuff like that, and that carries them away from their natural habitat. And then they can also be directly transported through humans. For example, if a scientist brings back a snake and then it gets loose. And now we're moving on to what allows for spreading to take place. So often it's the same type of food and similar habitat that allows these new invasive species to grow. Also, the amount of predators in their new habitat. For example, if a species had lots of predators in its original habitat and then got moved to a habitat where it has no predators, it would expand exponentially, which is what we're going to see with lionfish later on. Also, quick reproduction rates are another reason for invasive species spreading very fast. Moving on to negative effects that they can have on ecosystems. These are just some broad negative effects that are accessible to all invasive species. So they can force native species out or force native species numbers close to extinction. They can destroy the environment or habitat that they've been moved to. If they breed with local species, then they can create new species that can also be damaging. And then often resource competitions levels become extremely high between the invasive species and the native species, and this causes both species to not benefit, and it's a parasitic relationship. Now moving on to lionfish, the focus of today. So this is just some general background on the lionfish. So it originated from the Indo-Pacific region, largely around Malaysia and Australia. They are extremely predatory and they can feed on over 70 different species. So these are 70 different marine life and invertebrate species. And then usually lionfish need warm water regions. However, they have been known to survive almost anywhere, even temperatures between 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they also have an extremely deadly spine, which is used against predators. However, they have very few natural predators. Moving on to how they spread, or how they did spread. So there's a lot of speculation about how the spreading originated. However, it is most likely that they were released through aquarium owners. So for example, lionfish outgrew its aquarium, so the owner just dumped it into the ocean. And then this was the spottings of lionfish was first recorded in 1985 off the coast of off the Gulf of Mexico and around Florida. So Florida offered the perfect climate for the lionfish, which allowed them to spread extremely fast. There were similar types of food and an abundance of food, and they had no predators. Also, lionfish can mate year-round and reproduce year-round, which allows them to spread extremely fast. Now we're going to talk about some environmental effects of lionfish. They increase algae levels very much, and they add additional stress to coral reefs. They impact commercial and recreational reefs, and they consume all helpful fish. I will define helpful fish in a bit. Moving on to talk about the biodiversity effects. So again, large amounts of algae, and I will specify why algae in the next slide. Then there's a 79% consumption by a single lionfish. This means that one single lionfish can consume up to 79% of the baby fish in a coral reef system in 5 weeks. So this is an extreme number. lionfish consume cleaner species, and these are the species that help eat different harmful organisms which prevent algae. So cleaner species actually keep coral reefs clean and free from algae. However, since lionfish consume them, algae levels continue to rise. And then since there's so few prey left in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico where they have become invasive, they're resorting to cannibalism. Now, we're going to move on to talk more about the effects that lionfish have on humans. So first, moving on to talk about economic effects. There's an extreme reduction of commercial fish because lionfish consume so many groupers and snappers, which are major profits for commercial fishing. And then domestic fisheries are extremely hit hard in that surrounding area around the Caribbean. So it is extremely hard to, especially because groupers and snappers, which are some of the main food sources for lionfish, are some of the most extremely commercially fished fishes. There are over 160,000 jobs on the line just in Florida alone linked to the fishing industry, so it can be an extremely damaging result if the fishing industry were to collapse due to lionfish. And talking about the effects on tourism. So restaurants are in extreme trouble as they're losing their main sources of food because seafood is a major resource in lots of places around the Caribbean. And if they were to lose this, then tourism would also decline. Florida's main industry is tourism, and so the economy is extremely closely tied to lionfish. And then the destruction of reefs and local fish is the number one problem right now due to lionfish because of the consumption of cleaners and all the 70 different species that the lionfish eat. And then diving tourism is also extremely impacted because once the coral reefs die out and there becomes less schools of fish and less biodiversity of fish, then people are less likely to dive because there won't be anything to see. So we have all these problems, but what do we do next? How do we advance? So here are just a few possible solutions. These are the top 5 main ones that are in use. So government encouraging hunting. So this is done with spears, as you can see in the picture below. And this is the number one way to get rid of lionfish. Just fishing in general, this is also like hunting. Then moving on to shark training. This is actually a real thing where you can train sharks to hunt lionfish exclusively or specifically, and it's still in the process and it's not extremely effective yet. However, scientists are still working with this. Banning imports of aquarium-style lionfish. This was the main reason that lionfish became invasive. So to stop the income of lionfish from international resources. And then also just smartphone apps where you can report sightings of lionfish to divers so the divers know where to go. And then now we have some problems with proceeding and the problems with the solutions. So lionfish reproduce faster than we can kill them, and they just keep, especially because they reproduce year-round, and females are able to lay sacs with 2 million eggs. Granted, not all the 2 million eggs hatch, however, this is an extreme number. Lionfish are very spread out, and they dominate the whole of the waters between the Caribbean. Sorry, my headset almost died. But they dominate so much area that it's extremely hard to get rid of all of them. And then there are not many ways to kill them, as I listed before. The main technology right now is just spear fishing, which is not done on a large scale, and it can only get a few at a time. And also lionfish are extremely adaptive and can survive almost everywhere. So it will be extremely hard to force them out, and most scientists think it is impossible to completely eradicate lionfish in the areas they have become invasive. Thank you so much. These are my sources of information, and these are all my image sources.